Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. I'm Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
Howdy-ho.
Ruben Bressler.
Hey, what's going on?
Well, it's post-Thanksgiving. I hope you guys had a great holiday.
I did. I had a wonderful time.
Still working on those leftovers.
Whew, I got to drive a lot, as usual, all the way to Tennessee.
You went to a literal cabin in the woods.
I really did.
Yeah.
It was
Nice.
It was great. It wasn't that. It was fine.
No internet?
No internet at all. Like, not even a little
That's
bit.
probably, for Thanksgiving, that's probably preferable.
Well, I mean, no internet is fun if it's just the couple. But if it's like the couple and the kids, then you're just going to go crazy.
And, like, you don't realize how much stuff is connected to the internet in terms of the games you play and the things that you look at until you ain't got it.
I don't even wear a watch anymore. Like, I use my phone. I use it as an alarm clock. I use it as a clock. I use it as a map. I use it as a phone book. Like, yeah, I bet.
My high school teacher said that I would never have a calculator in my pocket. Well, shows what she knew.
They didn't know nothing. Well, look, we also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who is the most elegant and letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 elementals. Ruben?
This might be my favorite comment ever.
It's a good one.
Mr. Melkor Baggins. No ball lightning? This must be the biggest omittance in the top 10 history, and although I can forgive Aaron, who doesn't know what a red card is, the other two are just beyond redemption. Mr. Old School Evan and Mr. Red Deck Wins Ruben. Shame, shame, shame.
I feel shame.
And you're not wrong.
I'll have you know, I just put a lightning skelemental in my Rakdos EDH deck. So I mean, I'm close. It's a ball lightning with a skeleton wrapped around it. I mean, that counts, right?
It's a ball lightning, in fact.
Exactly.
Which is
lightning skelemental.
I'm gonna pair it with Palace Siege and then bring it back every turn.
You know, there's also
Ball lightning's a great one. Ball lightning's a good choice.
It's a fantastic choice. You know, and sometimes, you know, I've found, as we've done this almost 100 times, you know, that I sometimes go like, well, you know, I don't have to mention like Maelstrom Wanderer, because I'm like, surely Aaron's, you know, EDH loves the Maelstrom Wanderer, is going to get that in there. So okay, it's fine. I'll keep moving, because it's not necessarily my card. It's a very important elemental, but it's not my card. And Ball Lightning was a thing that I thought that maybe you could throw in there, because again, old school, it won some tournaments, it was very powerful back in the day. It's a red card, blah, blah, blah. And it's, you know what, sometimes we get called out. And that's what happens. Thank you to Mr. Melkor Baggins, not as good as YOLO Swaggins.
Hey, they're similar.
Almost YOLO Swaggins, but Mr. Melkor Baggins, please contact Erin. She'll get, before she blocks you, she's currently looking up your Twitter handle right now, because this is on YouTube. She'll find you. But right now,
it's in my mind. It's just a cybernetic implant of, and they're searching for it, and then
Aaron will get you your code for a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. Thanks for being part of the show, and thanks to Cool Stuff, of course, for sponsoring that giveaway. And you, who are listening and or watching this, could also win a $50 gift certificate if we pick your comment for next week, the honorable mention, which means we're going to get to talk about our top 10 tribes, and we are all over each other's lists. And
how have we not done this already? Tribes, creature types?
I went back and looked, and I was like, I went and double checked. I was like, this morning, I was like, I'm just going to like double. We've literally never done this.
Wow.
We've not done this.
I don't recall doing this, and if we don't recall doing it, then it must have been, unless this was some sort of mandala effect, where we just forgot doing a tribes episode.
Well, we've also made a lot of videos. I mean, it's between the live show and this. Like, I don't remember everything we talked about.
It's true. Well, that means we get to get started with our number 10. Ruben, what's your number 10?
My number 10 is one of my favorite tribes. It's probably the tribe that I talk about the most because I had the most personal success with it. It didn't win a Pro Tour. It wasn't the most dominant deck in its era, but for me, I had the most success with Kithkin. I love Kithkin. I loved Kithkin during Block Constructed. There aren't a ton of them. There's only 60 Kithkin in the history of Magic. Most of them from Lorwyn Shadowmoor era. And you had cards like Wizened Sen and, of course, Gold Medal Stalwart, which was almost always a 2/2 for 1 in the Kithkin deck. But you also had a bunch of cards that still see play to this day in various archetypes. Things like Gadok Teague, Figure of Destiny, Mist Meadow Witch is a card that was an all-star in my Blink Commander deck.
It's in my Sharoom EDH deck.
There you go.
And Kinsbale Cavalier just got printed into Historic on MPG Arena.
Nice. Well, there you go. And there's just I think that it's possible that Kithkin can return someday in some form or fashion. They were in Time Spiral, just a couple cards in Time Spiral, Amru Scout and Amru Seekers. But yeah, I just have deep-seated love for Kithkin.
I don't know how much like they want to go back to Lorwyn. Like I'm over here, hoping for Kamigawa one day. They figure out what they liked about Kamigawa. We go do something like the Japanese theme. It's going to be great because they're not going to repeat the past and yada yada. But for Lorwyn, it's fine. Like I loved it, right? I mean, I enjoyed it.
I love Lorwyn.
But in terms of like, I'm not sure how much they want to go back because like we went to Eldraine, right? Which is kind of Lorwyn.
Right.
Yeah.
And the problem with Lorwyn that I've always heard is that it is a world without humans.
Mm-hmm.
And being a world without humans is difficult to market, from what I gather.
I've never understood that mentality of I'm going to play a fantasy game and be a human, which I am 24/7, 365. What fun. Like, if you're going to play a fantasy game, be a Kithkin, be a fox, be a golem. Like, think outside the box, man.
Yep, super fun, but the Kithkin themselves are great. Knight of Meadowgrain as the 2-mana 2/2 first strike lifelink. That card was just...
Kithkin weirded me out a little bit. The art of like the really big heads and like the really tiny bodies. They kind of remind me of, I'm sure there are some people old enough watching who can appreciate this. Do you remember when we were kids and there were little people? And like they used to have the big round plastic heads and they'd have like the little... almost like a thimble body on them.
You mean like the trolls or whatever with the hair?
No, they were called little people. Like they were a toy called... Somebody in the YouTube comments, help me out here. That was a toy. It makes sense. They're real. I'm not crazy. That's what they remind me of.
Oh, I see what you're looking at. Yeah,
Thank you.
Like preschool toys.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Interesting.
Okay.
I didn't know that these were what they were called, but yes, I get you now.
Yeah. So.
I see. Okay, yeah, I understand now. It's fine.
Fisher Price, little people.
You got to go all the way to Fisher Price. We're not talking like anything beyond toddlers.
Nope.
Which is fine. But no, the Gadok Teague, again, is also one of those cards that it was super iconic and cool and neat and kind of hard to reprint. They just put it into Ultimate Masters finally. But Kithkin are great. Aaron, what's your number 10?
So the criteria for my list is that I wanted a multi-format dominance or multi-format appearances. I wanted creature types or tribes that have made an impact in multiple formats. And so my first 5 are going to be kind of more commander-like, cards that might have seen one-ofs in various good decks or formats. But my number 10 is probably it's one of 2 really on-brand tribes that I have. And this is one that just makes me laugh and that I love so much because it's so black, it's so dark, it's so over the top, and it's so fun at the same time. We talked about fantasy games and we can't market it to, you can't be a human. Screw that. I want to be the evilest, vilest, darkest thing. And my number 10 helps me do that. I chose demons. And so demons typically are very big. They're usually fatties. They usually can fly. They tend to have weird downsides to them to validate the power because, having a demon usually comes with a price. And so it can be something like Desecration Demon where, someone can sacrifice it and control it. Or it could be something like Lord of the Pit where you're required to, feed it creatures, otherwise it kills you. Or you have Dread Keiko Demon, which is 10 mana in 8/8, and if you actually paid for it, meaning you didn't cheat it into play or anything, it'll destroy all creatures your opponents control and then tap everything you control. And so I love the weird clauses. I love how powerful they are. They usually come with some really mind-blowing art. Remember that demon with the heart of 3 baby heads where it was just like, what is going on? And so it's just so over the top in a way that Black doesn't normally get, and I love them so much.
They just get to be like big and scary. Sire of Insanity.
They're now a win condition. If you're playing Liliana's Contract, if you have 4 demons, you can win the game. Like, how awesome is that? That's not hard to do.
And speaking of 4 demons, one of them is the Gristle Dad. So you have to have it on there.
And how over the top is that? A bargain on a stick? Like, what?
Exactly. Each Magic color gets 1 big iconic creature type and 1 small iconic creature type. They tried, at least. And Black, they did it very well. Because demons are the big, black, creature type. That is what they are. They stayed away from devils for the most part with black. They stayed away from any of the other big black kind of iconic beasties. And from Lord of the Pit onward, it was always going to be demons. And so, just a really iconic tribe for sure.
I disagree a little bit on there, and we'll get to it later. And I know we'll get to it later for reasons, but being able to see Runescarred Demon as the #1 ranked demon per EDH rec rank,
I believe it.
That's awesome. It's a demonic tutor on top of a 6/6 flyer for 7 mana, which is fantastic. Westvale Abbey is #2, which isn't technically, but kind of technically
fine. Yeah. I accept.
Which is awesome, and even Harvester of Souls coming out of Avacyn Restored.
Yeah.
That card is still worth a couple dollars, even despite being printed 4 times.
I can't think of, if I'm running a black deck, I'm probably running that card. Like my Rakdos deck has it, my Zansha deck has it, She-Ray has it. I mean, it's one of those things that it's a big body with Death Touch, but if you also just leave it alone, the passive ability, you're going to get some cards out of it.
Yeah, Harvester of Souls, if you don't know, is 2 black, 4 generic mana for a 5/5 Death Touch. It is originally from Avacyn Restored. And when it says, whenever another non-token creature dies, you may draw a card. That doesn't say yours. That's any creature at the table.
If you're playing black, you got a way to kill things. And, it's big enough where you can tailor your board wipes. Like if you're playing the Soot, what's the Ritual of Soot? It ain't dying to that. Or if you play Bioblight or you play Drown in Sorrow, like it's just going to survive. Languish, doesn't care.
It's true. So for my number 10, it's difficult to talk about it exactly without just sort of almost giving it away immediately. But there is something so incredibly powerful about this creature type. It was incredible because they have 165 cards that make up a set, right? They make up a small set back in the day. 165 cards in that whole set, and 8 of them are this creature type. And this creature type defined that entire set. There are 8 ninjas in Betrayers of Kamigawa. And Betrayers of Kamigawa is absolutely known as the ninja set. Ninjas have kind of recently gotten more of their due. We're up to 22. Goodness gracious. And that also includes stuff like unsets and whatever. That's not as many as I would like personally. I think ninjas are super cool. I think there's tons of things they can do with them. Ninjutsu is still really sweet and sort of a fun mechanic and whatnot. And they've had cards like Ink Eye Servant of Oni was sort of the first big ninja, and it's still #1 on EDH Rec. It's a really cool commander. Ninja the D-Powers is #2. Ninja the D-Powers is like the quintessential ninja. That's what they wanted it to do. They wanted to be a blue creature. They wanted to be sneaky and give you some card advantage, sort of like make you feel like you kind of got one in on them, which is really cool. A consistent, set of card advantage if you can get the blockers out of the way. Like, ninjas are sweet, and we now literally have Commander Ninjutsu. That's
yeah. I mean, I think they've done a good job taking it out of just Kamigawa, because I feel like it's one of those mechanics that could have very easily not left or been very difficult to translate. And so I think there was even like a zombie ninja at one point. And so, God bless the supplemental products. We talked about Lorwyn as well and the unlikelihood of us going back, but the supplemental products are where we can still go back to Lorwyn, even if we don't go back in an official capacity. You can still visit Kamigawa or visit Lorwyn. And I think it's great that these cards are having like a second or third life, even after the planes are gone and over with.
I just love the fact that there is there's a card that's one of those half augment cards that's called Ninja, where you turn your creature into a ninja something.
Yeah, and I think it's just something, even going back to being a kid, it was like, I know it's sort of taboo to say that, like, we used to play cowboys and Indians, or you played cops, or you played, you dressed up as things. And, I remember being a little kid and having, you seeing the neighbor boy dressed up as a ninja. It was just something you did. Either it was a Halloween costume or it was something you thought about, being when you grew up. It was something cool, And so, in a way, you can be a knight if you want to, or you can be a ninja. There's something for everybody, depending on what your childhood fantasy was.
Well, there was Teenage Mutant Turtles that were.
There you go. I'm just saying.
That were ninjas. Like, there was like Ninja Gaiden on the NES. Like there were later Ninja Gaiden Black on the Xbox later on. And then again, Ninja Turtles have been here for the past 20, 25 years. And yeah, it's been pretty cool.
I love that you say Gaiden.
Is that wrong?
I don't know. I always said Gaiden, but
beats me. Yeah. What's that? What you did there? Number 9, Ruben. What's number 9?
My number 9. Now we all have a lot of overlap, everybody.
Yeah.
And my number 9 is my first of 4 hires on someone else's list.
Don't worry, I'll get to mine soon, and then I'll see you guys in the top 2. Aaron, what's your number 9?
So my number 9 is a creature type that I first experienced during Battle for Zendikar block. I took a break from the game for about 10 years or so, and I came back around Innistrad. So I wasn't there for original Ravnica and original Zendikar and things like that. And so I was really excited for Battle for Zendikar because that was going to be, I was going to feel like I could finally get to see Zendikar. And I was very disappointed when number 1, the block wasn't very good. But number 2, it was very easy for me to see the disappointment of people around me who had been there the first time and were like, this wasn't what it was. Like, don't get it twisted. But if you weren't excited about this tribe this time, go back and look at what they used to do because they were way more impressive. My number 9 is Ally or Allies. So Allies are a lot like Slivers in that they are a creature type, and when they enter the battlefield, when the creature in question or another ally enters the battlefield, usually something happens, as opposed to Slivers that just sort of have this always on kind of anthem ability. This blink thing you can kind of manipulate if you have any sort of like eerie interlude type effects, or any way to like just bring these creatures back over and over again. One of my favorites is Hagra Diabolus, which is 4 colorless and a black. It's an ogre shaman ally. Whenever it or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, you may have a player lose life equal to the number of allies you control. So you basically have a Gary ability. This is an uncommon. And so if you play just your crappy, here's a Hagra sharpshooter, triggers, you can just drain somebody. You have General Tazari, which is an amazing general for allies, that can make them very, very big. And so I have seen ally EDH decks get out of hand so quickly. And there's so many ways that you can build them. 5 color allies if you want to. I believe they've seen Modern play occasionally, so they're not too competitive. But you just have to appreciate this style of deck and the way that allies play with each other. And hopefully when we go back to Zendikar, they will do them right again this time.
The General Tazari EDH deck that I'm most familiar with plays 1 ally in its deck, and it's just 5 color aristocrats that wants to search out Zulaport Cutthroat.
Oh, geez. I'll allow it. That's fine.
Which is kind of great. Like, it's just like, this General Tazari just does one thing, and the only thing it does is it goes and gets a Zulaport Cutthroat.
Okay.
And then it just plays a bunch of aristocrat stuff.
So, a couple things about allies. First of all, the one that got anywhere close to somewhat competitive play was Turn Timber Ranger.
Yeah.
This was a 5-mana 2/2. We got excited about 5-mana 2/2s, y'all, back in the day. 2 green, 3 generic mana for that 2/2. It is a rare from Zendikar. It says, whenever it or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a 2/2 green wolf creature token onto the battlefield, and if you do, put a +1/+1 counter on Turn Timber Ranger. We had never seen such value. That value was unbelievable.
It's 5 mana for 5 power on a 3/3 and a 2/2, and then continued to have value once it was in play.
Yeah,
so
that was incredible. Our minds were blown. So right before Pro Tour, the Pro Tour San Juan, there was this weird rumor, and I think it was Pro Tour San Juan. I could be mistaken, but I think it is. There was this weird rumor that the Japanese had broke it, that the Japanese had found the deck, because this was Zendikar block constructed, was this Pro Tour, okay? And what they did, as I recall them buying like 100 copies of Jawari Shapeshifter right before the event. And it freaked everyone out. And everyone was like, oh my God, they broke allies, because allies was the block mechanic. Did they figure out the right build? Blah, blah, blah. And of course, no one was playing allies. It was this huge, like, punt fake type of thing. And who knows if they ever actually bought any of them anyway. And it wasn't just a giant story that got thrown around because it was funny to talk about.
Or if that's just some galaxy brain, buy 100 copies of some garbage rare.
And then see if people believe it.
Love
but Ally's sweet, and Ally these days, they just kind of like put it on stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you know, it doesn't have to be when this or another ally does so-and-so. It's just like, well, this is an ally.
This thing is also an ally.
And you can also make allies. I expect allies to come back in Zendikar Uprising, in Zendikar something?
Zendikar Uprising,
Yeah. I expect them to show back up, because that's one of the things we loved about the plane.
And they were so watered down. Like, I felt like they were scared of like what it could do, because there were some like the Diabolus that are really quite good. And so I feel like whoever was in charge was just worried about making it too good. And it was like, you could have pushed it a little bit.
Well, these days they don't care. So the allies are going to be insane
Yes,
when we get back to Zendikar.
I look forward to complaining about them in an episode a year or two from now.
Yeah.
Very, very nice. Well, look, my subtype for my number 9 is a creature type they don't have a ton of, all right? We got a whopping 28 of these, but they're very, very important for a few reasons. One, historically and contextually. The fact that I grew up and I was 15 years old and I got to play Magic, when Ice Age first came out. And I also got to see at the time, culturally, that Magic had this weird stigma at the time in the 90s as like this thing that could be harmful for children. And thankfully, at the time, my mom was taking me to a church and they didn't really care to really bring it up ever. But, I saw stuff here and there about like, Magic does things, blah, blah, blah. And they've got satanic symbols on the so-and-so. And I'm like, what? And I found the pentagrams and stuff later. And I was like, wow, that's really crazy. Because one of the big things and something Mark Rosewater has also spoken about, which is they had a spell called Wrath of God. And they wanted to not have a spell called Wrath of God. Not to mention they later, went full in for damnation, but they really didn't want to have the word God on a Magic card, which is right. Later we got, the fixed version that doesn't have the regeneration or whatever in Day of Judgment, which is fine. But we finally come to the point, and we're about to come back to Theros, but when we got to Theros, we have gods, legitimate god creatures with the creature type of God, and that is my number 9. As you have, just for example, Athreos, God of Passage, which is one of the most popular of these gods, is a black, white, and generic mana for a 5/4 legendary enchantment creature that is indestructible, and as long as your devotion to white and black is less than 7, it's not a creature. Devotion means the number of pips of white and black among the permanents you control. Whenever another creature you own dies, return it to your hand unless target opponent pays 3 life. So if you have something that sacrifices things, you keep getting stuff back. But gods are sweet. Gods are cool. Gods work in really weird ways. They brought them back again for the Locust God, for the stuff on Amonkhet, which I thought was really cool. All those gods are like super powerful, super sweet. Hazoret, of course, just ran that format, which was cool for a variety of reasons. God Eternal Oketra, why doesn't that card see play? I just don't really understand it. It's so stupidly powerful.
It did for a second.
Yeah, it was in the sideboard of like the Bant mid-range decks. I just finished building what I call Oketra's Bouncy Castle in EDH, and it is hilarious.
Yeah. Purphoros, God of the Forge, is the number 1 not close god.
$30 card last time I looked.
Yeah, it's a little over $20. It's about $20 these days. $50 foils. Yeah, Purphoros is a 4-mana 6/5 that if your devotion is less than 5, it's not a creature. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Purphoros deals 2 damage to each opponent, and you can pay 3 mana, a red and 2 generic mana. Creatures you control get +1/+0 until the end of turn. So
I love the flavor of the gods. The idea that they're being worshipped with devotion, where it's like if you worship them enough, which is you show that you love them by having all of these pips, they will sort of come to you and do what you ask them to do. The fact that they started off as just indestructible. You can't really kill a god. You need very special weapons for that or special tools. But they didn't, do it the same way twice. The next time around when we went to Amonkhet, well, you could kill them, they just come back to your hand, and so you have to kind of recast them. And then they did it differently again when War of the Spark came around, where you can kill them, they then become the 3rd card in your deck, and if somebody can make you shuffle, well, there's a way to deal with it. And so I love that they reinvent the wheel every time. I love that they're all just sort of these awe-inspiring cards that warrant your attention, that you have to deal with. I think the god creature type is just such a win, and I always love seeing how they do it, and I love playing with them too.
For my money, the best villain that is just like a standalone villain, doesn't go into the big Nicol Bolas Avengers story arc, none of that sort of stuff, is Xenagos. That Xenagos story is so good and so fun. Of like, I'm just being a planeswalker, not enough for me. I want to be a god, and then does it. And then that story was so just interesting and cool, and you didn't need any other greater context other than seeing the planeswalker and then seeing the god. And that was just so much fun. And man, gods are a really fun creature type.
Gods
I
are
actually
super sweet.
was a little disappointed with the Theros story. I know originally Ashiok was supposed to be the villain, and they got rid of it because they were concerned about because Ashiok was different, they were worried about, well, this is going to be our first sort of asexual, agender character, and if we make them a villain, what is that saying? You know, so they kind of scaled back on that a little bit and still made Ashiok mischievous and chaotic, but not necessarily evil. I was really disappointed with the Xenagos story because I wanted to know what happened to the original Gruul god. Of like, where did that vacant? I was hoping that the original would come back and like kind of claim the throne or like play an instrumental part in all of this, and it was just never really discussed where that vacancy in the pantheon came from. And
well, hopefully we'll get some closure there.
Yeah,
go to Theros Beyond.
Hopefully Elsbeth will too. Close that wound.
There you go.
Heyo. All right, so let's move on here to number 8. Ruben, what's number 8?
Still hires. Got a lot of hires near the bottom here.
I got this.
Oh boy, Aaron, what's number 8?
My number 8 is a creature type that recently got some love, thanks to some new standard sets, and made such an impression that people were even trying this creature type in Legacy and even Vintage. Can you imagine using your Moxen to pay for one of the cards I'm about to talk about? It didn't really last long, but I'm, convinced that somebody could do something with it, and it was fun while it lasted. My number 8 are Elementals. Have you ever seen someone pay for a Risen Reef with Moxen?
Nice.
It has happened.
That sounds great.
So Risen Reef was really the big card that sort of fueled this resurgence. It's 1 colorless, 1 green, 1 blue from M20, a 1/1 elemental for 3. But when it or another elemental enters the battlefield, you can look at the top card of your library. If it's a land, put it on the battlefield tapped. If you don't put the card on the battlefield, put it into your hand. This is card advantage in elementals. There've been a lot of elementals through the years that we've seen, like Shriekmaw, Ingot Chewer, Wispmare, from the Lorwyn sets, beloved cards like Muldrifter, Revelark, which we talked about in our last episode. Elementals have always been, woven throughout the course of Magic's history. Even bigger, more obnoxious elementals that I love, like the elemental incarnations, Dread, Guile, Hostility, Purity, Vigor, amazing just beasts of elements that just have these crazy. Dread, for example, as 6/6 with Fear. Remember Fear? Whenever a creature deals damage to you, kill it, and then if it's put in the graveyard from anywhere, shuffle it in your library. Just these awe-inspiring things. And so you have these elementals that run the gamut from being sort of like workhorses all the way to these big beasts that you have to respect, and I love that.
I mean, you have Titania, the protector of Argoth. Is
my first ever preview
elemental
card. I got her when I was on the deck tease.
Nice. That's great. I mean, I didn't get a chance to talk about Vigor, which is from Lorwyn, which I totally loved. Multani, who is amazing. Yavamaya's avatar from Dominaria. Regal Force, which is fan-freaking-tastic. Even, I don't think no one mentioned Animar, I believe.
Yep, the Soul of the Elements. Yeah. One of the most popular teamer commanders. I don't think we talked about Risen Reef on the show last week. That would have been another good honorable mention.
That would have been.
Yeah, that's that elementals. I mean, forever, right? Ever since Air Elemental and Earth Elemental, we've had the elementals as part of our iconic creatures.
There you go. All right. So for my number 8, you're gonna have to go a little bit deeper. We got to go all the way back to old school because old school Evan. That's what I do. Old man magic here.
Shake your cane.
Just clocking in. It's not like they never make more of these types of creatures. I would argue they don't make them as much as I would like them to make them. Because
and they don't make them like they used to, Evan? It did back when the rocks were soft and this was all trees.
That's right. That's right. Uphill both ways, y'all. Because, back in my day, they used to use creatures like this to put in like weird Easter eggs and stuff. They used to use creatures like this to help sell magic. They used creatures like this to really like amp up some mystical, fantastical elements of whatever plane they happen to be on. I loved it. And the idea, like one of the first cards I ever saw in Magic, that was like one of the coolest images, one of the coolest things. And I had to own one. At one time I did own one. I owned a Juzum Djinn because I love Djinns. I think Djinns are cool. They are the magical genies of the lamp, essentially. But, you have a lot of them. Some of them came back in Khans of Tarkir, which was nice. A lot of Djinn monks, for example. A few of those in there. And they've been peppered them, throughout history here and there. Djinn Illuminatus is kind of cool. Tempest Djinn showed up in Dominaria. So it's not like they won't make them, but I think there's a lot of, opportunity there to have really powerful, interesting creatures that usually have either some sort of drawback or some sort of way to make them interesting. Urnum Jin, for example, used to run standard way back in the day, and I remember Nettletooth Jin, like, we were freaking out. I'm telling you, back in the day, when Nettletooth Jin showed up 4 mana for a 4/4 that deals a damage on your upkeep, we was flipping out, y'all. They don't bring it, they don't give it to us like no more. They never want to give us Joseph Jin, but they'll give us a 4 mana 4/4, and it sucked. But we didn't know that, and it took us a long time, and I love Jin.
It's tricky because Jin are usually associated with Asian-inspired themes. You know, when you look at like Mirage, you look at Visions, or you look at Arabian Nights, and so it's very hard to just sort of, you can't put that in every set. Like, you couldn't put a Jin on Innistrad. It just doesn't make sense. You know, it's one of those things that has to go with the flavor. And so it tied in really well with Tarkir that had a lot of Asian elements to it with the Jeskai and things like that. And so I think when there are opportunities to use them, I always like seeing them. This is one of those words, people sometimes talk about how Magic has enhanced their vocabulary. You know, I remember being little and not even knowing, I used to say Dajin. I was like, that's a Mohammedi Dajin. I didn't even know. And so, you know, I learned how to say Jin, and I learned what a Jin was through Magic the Gathering. And so very, very neat aspect of Magic that, you know, we all think about and love.
Mahatmati Jin is one of the most iconic.
Urnam.
Urnam Jin, of course. Old Man of the Sea, I believe, is a Jin.
I don't think he is.
I believe so.
Oh, okay.
Is he?
In any case, there's Jin have a long history.
He's right. No, it is a Jin. I am so sorry. You are totally right.
Also, I love the art of the old man just choking someone with his legs.
That's right. I don't know why I remembered that, but there's anyway. Jin is I think it's they tried to make Jin the big blue creature type.
Yeah.
To go along with you know how each color has its own big. So when you have a big 5-power flyer, it's a Jin usually.
Right. Zahid Jin of the Lamp was really sweet in Dominaria, and Tempest Jin, of course, was up there too.
Yep. So I love seeing Jins and genies and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it's really sweet. All right. Let's move on here to number 7. I don't have anything until number 2.
Oh, Jesus.
It's higher.
765 43. Wow, that's crazy. Well, I also do not have a number 7. It's one of my hires as well.
And you said you don't have a number 6 either?
My 7 and 6 are higher as well.
I have a 6.
Oh, so you have your number 7 and 6 are higher?
Me too.
Oh boy, well, we don't have a number 7. Zoom right by it.
No number 7s, but I have a number 6.
You will be the only one with a number 6. Ruben, what's number 6?
And whereas Aaron likes to have creature types that have a wide swath of historical significance, which makes a lot more sense than the creature type that I have at number 6, which was good for like 6 months. But it was so good for that 6 months that it was dominant for that 6 months, because my number 6 is Rebels. Rebels as a creature type is an iconic creature type because of what it did. I think that people remember. If you say Rebel, it's like certain creature types, they do certain things, right? Like you say Dragon, it's a 5/5 flyer, or Demon, it's a 5/5 flyer, right? Or if you say Spectre, it makes you discard a card when it hits you. Right? Or if you say Elf, it adds green mana, right? If you say Rebel, it searches out other rebels. And this was originally a creature type from the Mercadian Masks expansion that was paired alongside of Mercenaries. Now, the problem is that Mercenaries go and get creatures that are down the scale and are a little bit beefier. But the problem is that Rebels are kind of just garbage, but they get other rebels, so they just get bigger, right? So you had Ramosian Sergeant that was a 1 mana 1/1 that allowed you to search out creatures that are rebels that are 2, and then you would have Lieutenant that was a 2 that would go get 3s, and then you had a 3 that went and got a 4, and a 4 that got a 5, etc., etc. And you didn't need anything except for Sergeant. Like, you just started with 4 cards in your hand, 3 planes and a Ramosian Sergeant, and you went to town. Like, that was all you needed.
And then Civi, which would go get X.
Right. And then the big problem was
the
big problem was you got Lin Civi, Defiant Hero, which was a colorless white for a 1/3, a rare from Nemesis, a Rebel Legend that had X tap, search your library for a Rebel card with converted mana cost X or less, and put that card into play, then shuffle your library. It also allowed you to rebuy rebels that died. You can pay 3 mana to put a rebel card from your graveyard on the bottom of your library. Of course, Pro Tour New York 2000 was dominated by rebels, with Kai winning that tournament over Warren Marsh in the finals, which that was a Rebels mirror match. Then Ruben also played Rebels at that tournament. Just a million Rebels decks at that tournament. And then that was it. That was it for Rebels.
I mean, let's also remember that Lynn Civvy, the problem was at the time, Legends, when you played a Legend, your opponent could not play a copy of the same Legend.
Yes.
It was this interaction which led to the first change, which was if you both had the same Legend, you have to sacrifice both of them. Which then later was they don't care if people have the same Legend, and then later was you can have as many Planeswalker, Jaces or whatever it is you want, because who cares anymore? But at the time that was super important. That made winning the die roll unbelievably important in that event. And the idea that you can pay X and just go get anything that has the word Rebel on it is just ridiculous. And honestly, probably really bad design, no matter how you look at it in terms of what's the game, you look at, for example, gameplay loops. Because I think of today, for example, right now we're dealing with the oven and the cat. Okay. And the oven sacrificed cat sacrificed food, bring it back to thing. That is a gameplay loop that we're going to see a lot over the next year or so, or year or two, until Drain finally rotates out. But that's a loop that they have. So Lynn Civvy going and getting Rebels was a thing that just kind of happened over and over and over again. And when you had a Pro Tour where this was easily the best thing you had going, then it just took over.
I actually conflated 2 Pro Tours. There was Pro Tour New York, that was eventually won by Mono Blue Fish, that had 6 Rebels decks in the top 8, and then later Pro Tour Chicago that Kai won over Camiel Cornelson in the finals, which was Rebels over Counter Rebels. It was 2 different tournaments, but they were within a couple of months of each other, and then no one played Rebels ever again.
All right, let's move on here to number 5. Ruben, what's your number 5?
5 is higher.
Oh, that's your last higher?
That's my last higher, is my number 5.
Aaron, what is your number 5?
My number 5 is a really problematic creature type. We're starting to get into the ones that are seeing competitive play here. And there are certain creature types that get better the more of them that we have. And they're also a creature type that Wizards is going to keep making. And so every time a creature comes out that happens to be of this type, there's this concern of, okay, are we reaching a critical mass? Does the deck do too many things? Is it just too good? And there's always this sigh of relief. I remember when Deputy of Acquittals, I think it was, came out, and people were like, whoo, thank God this isn't my number 5, because otherwise we would never hear the end of it. And they still put his ass in their decks. My number 5 is humans. We've said it before, Wizards will put humans in every set because people just want to be human for some reason. I don't know why. In modern, humans has been a very good strategy for ages between Meddling Mage. Meddling Mage is main deck now, 4 copies. Why ask why? You play Thalia, you play Meddling Mage, you play Mantis Rider. I didn't even remember Mantis Rider was a human. You play a shaky as hell mana base and some Aether Vials, and you have yourself a good time. Thalia's Lieutenant pushes you over the edge with humans that enter the battlefield. You play Phantasmal Image, which also can make humans and give you ETB effects. You can even play it in Legacy. I've seen some sort of Rainbow Legacy lists see play with humans. I've seen people do it in Vintage as well. You have powerful cards like Containment Priest. You have, again, the Thalias. I mean, it just has a home in every single deck. And the more they keep printing them, the more we wonder, is it going to get too good? Is this going to be a problem? And it's a terrifying deck.
Yep.
I mean, you have humans are a excellent. Well, first of all, this was my number 6. So
this is my number 7.
Nice. So we're all right there with it. Humans have to be, I think, in the top 10.
Yeah.
They just reached a complete, a mass that was too much to ignore. And
critical mass, yeah.
Yeah, critical mass, thank you. And when they got to that point, it was like, oh God. I felt like humans just kind of snuck up on everybody. And once everyone started playing them, it's like, oh wow, clearly they're one of the best tribes of all time.
I think what really pushed it over the edge was we had some good humans from Shadows over Innistrad, Thalia's Lieutenant being one of them, New Thalia herself being one of them. But we also had a peak of those rainbow lands. We got that land from Ixalan.
Unclaimed territory.
Yeah, which was name a creature type. And so that was really, the mana base is shaky as hell. Humans basically folds to Blood Moon, let's be honest.
It's true.
Well,
they run
if you
a
get
couple.
rid of their Aether Vial.
Well, even even then, it's not ideal, but, so the mana base is really shaky, and so there's only so many rainbow lands to go around, but having one that goes by creature type, you can play that and Cavern of Souls, and it's just like, Jesus Christ. Yeah. And so it was really just sort of this perfect storm of good new creatures plus good lands, and sometimes that's all it takes to make these tribal strategies work, is just 1 or 2 cards.
Between that and Ancient Ziggurat and all that, it just kind of...
2,341 humans, by far the most numerous creature type in the history of Magic. And it was Kitesail, Freebooter, and Unclaimed Territory.
Yeah.
They were the 2 cards.
Yeah,
that were like...
Duress with Wings. Yeah.
Those are the 2 cards that pushed them over the top.
Right, you gave them the mana that it was right there at the mana. It needed that extra push, and you needed that disruption, which is what they gave you with that Freebooter. It was just enough. Now on the EDH side, Eternal Witness is the number 1 human with a bullet. Laboratory Maniac's in there. Archaeomancer is in there. Things like Trinket Mage is super fun. Those are really fun humans. But when you go to the competitive side, you have Mother of Runes, Tireless Tracker, Snapcaster Mage, like
Royal Assassin, Delver of Secrets.
Yeah, some classic stuff. That said, all right, that is the only number 5 we got. Let's move on to number 4. Again, I don't have one. I'll see you guys at number 2. Ruben, what's number 4?
So
you ain't got none either. Okay.
I think that when you say, there's a difference between top 10 creature types and top 10 tribes, right? And when you say top 10 tribes to me, I think of what are the most dominant tribal decks in the history of Magic. And I don't think that there's ever been a more dominant creature type tribal strategy than fairies. Ever. When Fairies was at its peak, there was no beating it. It just dominated everything, and it has continued to be dominant. Bitter Blossom, of course, being the main culprit.
I'm sorry, what?
Bitter Blossom. Bitter Blossom. And of course, now we have Brazen Borrower, which follows up in the double B's category, seeing vintage play. And Fae of Wishes, of course, in Standard as well. But there's just been a history of powerful fairies in all sorts of formats, from Pauper with Fairy Miscreant, and what's the one that counters a spell? Equal to the number of fairies that you have.
No. Spellstarter Sprite.
Spellstarter Sprite, that's the one.
Yes.
But also in Standard, you had Scion of Una, you had Pestermite, just so many different fairies throughout history. But the big one was when fairies was dominant in Standard. You went turn 1 Thoughtseize or Ancestral Vision, turn 2 Bitter Blossom, turn 3, didn't matter what you did, turn 4 Mistbind Click, and that was game over.
Fairies is my number 6, and different creature types bring different things to the table. I mentioned that humans' strength was in there being so many of them, and the fact that you really can play kind of any color mana you want to, and they all have these ETB effects, and they all can make each other bigger and overwhelm you. Allies had the ETB thing. If you had so many allies, they had various effects that made them interesting. Demons, you just sort of slam them as fatties and say, deal with this, and they have some weird side effects. Fairies is really interesting in that they play this sort of pesky tempo combo game with you. A fairies deck doesn't necessarily win by being bigger. You're not suddenly going to spit out a 4/4 fairy, or there aren't many fairy crusade type effects. Right. No, they are going to be these sort of little 1/1s, 2/1s, 2/2s, maybe a 3/3, that'll just sort of overwhelm you by being flyers, and also very disruptive. The ability to Vendilion Click, to take a card, put it on the library, to flash in a counter spell, to play sort of this tap out control game. The fairies creature type definitely has one of the more interesting play styles behind it, and has a very small devoted following. Pros like Yuta Takahashi, have sometimes played blue-black fairy decks, and people are like, what? And there's just a small devoted following out there that wants nothing more than to play Bitter Blossom, and God bless them.
Why are they always like villains? I don't get it. Like, I've seen multiple creature types.
I don't think they're villains. I think they're just more like, they're sort of mischievous, maybe chaotic, if you will. I don't think they've ever been like villains.
They were definitely villains, as I recall. They were
villainous. They weren't the main villains.
They weren't the main villains.
Weird stuff. There's different shades of evil. Like, Una's not like cackling evil. She's not trying to like.
Traditionally, in fairy tales, at the very least, the Fae are chaotic good or chaotic neutral, not necessarily evil, not necessarily nefarious or malicious, but they are a force against the good.
Well, they made them so good, they definitely got malicious and nefarious before it was over. Miss Mind Click, tapping down someone's lands. The idea that is, the idea that you don't let people play Magic and that's the best thing you can do in Constructed is just gross. But okay. All right. So that was our number 4, our one and only. Let's move here to our one and only number 3. Ruben, what's your number 3?
So now we're getting to what I consider to be the big 3. Like, I had a very clear delineation on my top 3 because I felt like there are creature types that are just iconic. They can, they all have their own decks that have won Pro Tours, first of all. Decks that have been popular in multiple different expansions, different standards. Decks that have versions of their decks that are in the older formats. Decks that have multiple lords. Decks that have multiple Magic the Gathering releases featuring just their creature types. And my number 3 fits that pretty well. It's been featured as a creature type a number of times, but somehow didn't win a Pro Tour until there were multiple sets that featured it as a creature type. And really needed to have the critical mass, as we've talked about before, when Jerry Thompson finally broke through and gave Zombies its first Pro Tour win. 462 zombies in the history of zombies, going all the way back to the beginning of Magic. Tons of lords, including Lord of the Undead, better known as Señor de los Muertos.
Which was recently errated to be a zombie.
That's right.
Wasn't a zombie before, I remember.
That's right. Death Baron, of course. Aaron's favorite, Daxos. The Returned is a famous zombie as well. Scathe Zombies is one of my favorite pairings of classic flavor text to just a generic 2/2 for 3, you know. But also was very popular during Onslaught Block. It was featured during Onslaught Block as one of the creature types. Just a, you know, and of course, the one that I say is the best zombie of all time, Grey Merchant of Asphodel, being a zombie as well.
Yeah, zombies are mine. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, you sure?
Well, I was going to say, zombies are my number 4.
Okay, they're my number 7. And,
Nice.
you know, obviously I love zombies, you know, being a black mage and a necromancer. And, you know, zombies, I think, are just as ubiquitous as humans in that, you know, everybody wants to be a human, but zombies are sort of the dark side of that, of, you know, the idea of, you know, people you love or people around you being reduced to sort of these gibbering hordes. And, you know, what would that look like? And what would that feel like to see people that you loved be reduced to this? And, you know, the fear of the infection of zombies and the proliferation of zombies. And, you know, zombies can play an aggressive game with lots of zombies and make them bigger and all of that, but sometimes they also have this sort of aristocrat kind of bent to them where you can do the mortar pod thing where you sacrifice them, you can do the grave crawler thing where they keep coming back. You know, a lot of other creature decks are very weak to board wipes, but a zombie deck can survive one in one way or another, or they can make it very painful for you on the way out. And this was another one of those tribes that just needed the right 1 or 2 drops. You know, Diregraph Ghoul, you know, really pushed that thing over the edge. Crypt Breaker being the one drop that we needed the second time around. You know, always usually sees standard play whenever there are zombies around. Sometimes sees play in modern. Never really goes too far beyond that. Certain zombies do, but not zombie tribal themselves. But I'm always happy to see zombies, obviously. I made a zombie creature token. I own like 50 zombies just at any given time. And so great appreciation for them. And I love the play style more than anything.
Yeah, zombie is it's just iconic at this point. It's an icon in terms of like what is Magic, what does when you said that, you know, demon was the ultimate black creature type, and I was like,
in terms of the big ones. So each color has a big creature type, like demons, like and a smaller,
like a djinn,
right? And then a smaller creature type, like a zombie. And each color gets a pair like that. And demons is the big black, and zombies are the little black creature types.
Right. But then, of course, they like break their own rules. You have Macias, who's a 5/5, and Neheb, who's a 4/6, which is whatever. But, you do have Sidisi. Grey Merchant is great. Carrion Feeder, which was my number one, who I love.
Absolutely.
Midnight Reaper, who's doing a great job right now in Standard, drawing people a bunch of cards. Crypt Breaker, which is exactly what that deck needed. Diregraph Colossus right behind it. That card was unbelievably scary.
Diregraph Captain, back in original Innistrad block, was the Lord from the blue-black zombies. Didn't quite break through there, but
it didn't quite, but it had a moment there where it was like, wait, is that
where
real?
It was close, yeah.
Yeah, and then the spirits, the blue-white spirits, just ran off with it, which is whatever. But there are tons of great zombies. Josu Vess, I loved from Dominaria, which I thought was absolutely fantastic.
More
and
liches,
all the,
please.
I know, right? And the God Eternal Bantus and God Eternal Oketras.
Whoop, whoop.
Just terrific. Love all those guys. So yeah, so ever since Lord of the Undead, we've had awesome zombies in Magic. That's great. All right, so let's move on here to our, oh my gosh, number 2. We can all participate. Isn't that great? Aaron, what's number 2?
So my number 2 is a creature type that you might be a little surprised to see on my list, but this creature type, this tribe, has seen competitive play in Standard, even recently, Modern, Legacy, and Vintage. Apparently, just being blue means you can really get away with anything. You just pack a bunch of Force of Wills, throw in a couple Wastelands, and there's nothing you can't do. Servant Fish, my number 2 is Merfolk. Merfolk, their strategy really relies on the lords, the critical mass of the Lord of Atlantis, the Master of the Pearl Trident, and then you play things like Spreading Seas that turn your lands into islands, which does a really good job of disrupting you and taking you off the mana that you'll need to fight them, but then giving their Merfolk island walk so that they can walk right through you. So even if you were to have creatures yourself, you either can't beat them because they've grown so big that you can't deal with them. Master of Waves gave Merfolk the ability to go wide in a way that they'd never really been able to do before. Merfolk used to just kind of 1-for-1 you, just sort of match you creature for creature, but a lot of Merfolk don't even have colorless to them. So when you're playing a lot of literal 2 blue, 1 blue sort of creatures, it's very easy to get Devotion, and even a Master of Waves for 3 or 4 can be backbreaking and hard to deal with. This deck also ran Kira, Great Glass Spinner, who even is not a Merfolk, but still provides protection for this deck in terms of not being able to get rid of your lords. Mutavault is a great card in this deck, and that it also is a Merfolk, benefits from the lords and the island walk ability. You have Curse Catcher, which is a really pesky way to deal with board wipes. We had some recent additions in green, which are really, really cool. Kumena allowed this deck to see play in Standard. But if you can see play in older formats, that's certainly saying something. And every once in a while, you'll see a Legacy Merfolk list or a Vintage Merfolk list do well, and nobody's really surprised.
Yep. This was my number 8.
Okay.
Lower on my list than
my number
some
7.
of the other iconic. Yeah, there you go. Than some of the other iconic creature types. But certainly also very popular. All of the legendary Merfolk are super popular in Commander. These days, Thrasios as the Triton hero pairs up with usually Timna, from what I've seen. But you also have things like Tatiova and the various Prime Speakers to be able to Tuvasa, yep, as a new Enchantress Planeswalker. Not Planeswalker, General.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I love me some Merfolk. Just being able to do the ticky tack, replace yourself with Silvergill Adept, do some tricky things with Mara Regery. I love me a Merfolk.
Oh God, Regery is so dumb.
I have gotten to actually play in a Legacy event with Merfolk, and it was super duper fun. That was great. While Thrasios Triton Hero from Commander, was it 2016? Yes, is like $17. I was not really prepared for the second most expensive Merfolk, which is from Invasion. Do either of you know, without looking up obviously, do you even know, this is a very expensive Merfolk, printed one time. It's about $10. It's a $60 foil from Invasion, of course.
From Invasion.
Okay.
Invasion. Does it see play in the competitive decks?
No. This is at the top of the EDH rec. Well, at the top of the USD, cost is Thrasios, but the second is, this is definitely EDH. Let's see if I'll go ahead and give you some stats, see if you can get it. It's 2 blue and 3 generic mana. It's 5 mana, 1/3. It is a legendary.
I know what it is.
Legendary Merfolk Noble.
What's her nuts?
What's her nuts happens to have blue tap colon.
Galena?
Empress Galena. Yeah.
Empress Galena has 2 blue tap colon, gain control of target legend or
She's
legendary
$10?
permanent. She is.
Bless her heart.
Yeah, that's the thing. So, True Name Nemesis
And
is
she's
right
a
behind.
noble? That's adorable.
Yeah, they added a noble to her, which is great.
Well, she's an empress, so.
Yeah, I would expect a reprint of that in a either Commander product or a Judge promo at some point.
Yeah.
I think it would do really, really well. Either way, Merfolk was definitely on my list. I don't think you can talk about tribes and magic and not discuss, like, hey, Lord of Atlantis was like this thing.
Exactly.
And they took this thing and they just ran with it. And even we went all the way to Master of Waves, which was really super cool. And the mono blue deck turned out to be the best deck, and that was awesome. And even like super fun cards like Wander Wine Prophets are great. Coral Helm Commander is super fun. And recently, Emery, Lurker of the Lock. That thing is just doing all sorts of weirdness in modern decks or whatever.
I also appreciate that they found new ways to do it. You know, when Merfolk came back in Ixalan, we were worried, like, where's our lords? You know, because that's what we were so used to. And, you know, they gave us the ability to pump up the creatures in a very different way where, yeah, we can give you, you know, we'll give you a blue and a green, here's your lord. But at the same time, we're going to give you Kamena and we're going to give you the other one. I can't remember the name, but, you know, there's these 2 ways to, like, tap them and have card advantage too. And so, you know, not relying on the previous tropes and still finding ways to make it fresh fish.
So what you did there. Gotta serve it up. That's how you do it. Ruben, what's number 2?
My number 2, again, iconic. I think this one has multiple Pro Tour wins, but certainly has a iconic Pro Tour win in the hands of Luis Scott Vargas at Pro Tour Berlin, which is maybe the most iconic creature type in terms of, like, you say what the type is and you know what's coming. Like, you know what it's doing. It's been dominant in a number of formats. Every format it's been legal, from Pauper, you can run it in Commander, you can run it in Standard. I'm not sure I've ever seen a vintage deck of this creature type, but that's mostly because you have the Moxen and you don't necessarily need Llanowar Elves. My number 2 is Elves. It is, you know, just, it does what it does. It taps and adds green mana, and then it makes more elves, and then more elves come out, and that's how the deck wins. You know, you've seen, it become popular in Commander. It's another one of these creature types that is just, creatures just accidentally have the creature type elf sometimes, like Oracle of Moldiah or Deathrite Shaman. But then you also have the creatures that are very on purpose elves. Priest of Titania, Nissa, you know, Rishkar, Pima Renegade was a popular one more recently. It's just you've seen it as the first dual decks elves, and they always came. Then later, a new dual deck was Elves versus Inventors, because they needed a new way to show you new elves.
Absolutely.
Elves are my number 3. The way that Elves typically wins games is by making a critical mass of creatures, turning those creatures into mana, and then either making Azuri and then using Azuri to pump up your hordes beyond belief, or if you're playing Legacy, you turn that mana into a natural order, or you just make yourself a Craterhoof Behemoth using Gaia's Cradle, and you win by making a really, really big green fatty. If you're feeling particularly frisky, you can dump that mana into a natural order or a green Sun Zenith and get you a Progenitus if you really want to have a good time. But typically, Legacy just wins out of nowhere, where you see a bunch of crappy green creatures, and then you see Wirewood Symbiote, and you see Quirion Ranger, and the ability to bounce and make mana, and the mana just comes out of nowhere, where they can turn a Scavenging Is into this Hoover vacuum that just sucks up your graveyard, you know, or they can just hardcast everything, and kill you with really, really big green fatties. The ability to tutor for things. Glimpse of Nature is a busted mana card, magic card, and Legacy Elves is glad to have it. Sees play in Pauper as well. You see it in Pauper, you see it in Modern, you see it in Legacy. People have tried to make it happen in Vintage now that Mental Misstep is restricted. I haven't seen anybody have any real luck with it, but never say never.
I just can't understand why they haven't reprinted Bloomtender anywhere but the Mystery Booster. It's time, y'all. Like, what are you doing?
$40,
This card,
$60?
This card is $45, $46 for the original printing, only $41.30 for the mystery booster.
Wow.
That is absurd. It is the most expensive card in Eventide by like a country mile.
Yeah.
Though Helix Pinnacle is a $15 Magic card. Right? I just learned that. That's incredible.
Nice.
Speaking of other things, again, Elf was actually my number 3, so me and Aaron definitely on
We
that
were right there.
wavelength.
All of us were right there.
Very nice. Elves, right? It's just
Elves.
it's a thing. Llanowar elves usually win one of the first
You
cards
say
you've ever
magic,
seen.
you say fantasy, it's elves. Like
It's
elves.
elves.
Are, yeah.
And so, like, in just surprises, like, for example, do you even know what Norwood Priestess does from Portal Second Age?
I think that's the crappy Elvish Piper.
It is, in fact, crappy Elvish Piper. It is $36.
Great.
That's ridiculous. The second most expensive. The third most expensive is Selvala, Heart of the Wilds from Conspiracy Take the Crown. That's a $30 mythic. That is ridiculous.
Weird.
Yeah.
It's just a thing. And so elves are great. They're fun. You can mix and match them. They definitely have that explosiveness. It's kind of wild to think of how explosive and powerful elves are when they have something like, I don't know, maybe 20% of the number of cards that humans do. There's 395 elves and there's like well over thousands of humans, which is ridiculous. But elves are fun, super awesome to put together. If you can tell people if you want to build a green deck, you can build an elf deck. Everyone understands what that means. It's just a very magical term and creature type in Magic, and we're probably going to always have elves. I can't imagine not. And speaking of things I can't imagine us not having, and that would be my number 2 creature type. Now, there's something very magical about this creature type in that it don't matter. This is one of those creature types where it just doesn't matter. If it has this creature type on it, I don't care how terrible it is. I don't care how poopy it is. I don't care how much you don't like it. I don't care how many times they've printed it. I don't care. If this is a magic card and it has Angel on it, it's going to sell. It's going to be worth money. There's going to be somebody who's going to collect it. It's never going to go away. For God's sakes, our most expensive Angel is Avacyn. Second is Atraxa, who is an Angel horror.
Perfect.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
Which is amazing, absolutely. We had the whole world of angels turned upside down with Baneslayer Angel. That was the sort of the gauntlet thrown down of, by God, creatures are awesome now, and Baneslayer Angel is a good example of it, and that was terrific. We had Gisela, who flipped into the weird freakiness of Voice of Nightmares and Bracella, which is crazy.
Even just regular Gisela, just playing this sort of political game. I love dropping a Gisela in EDH and be like, y'all can kill each other. It's fine.
Yeah, whatever you like to do.
The only time I've ever had a angel tribal synergy is when I've played a Shalai followed by a Lyra back in Dominaria. But yeah, ever since Sarah Angel, you know what an angel does. You are familiar. It's the big white creature type. They rule the skies. There's nothing better. Every set has a 5-mana angel that does something, that gains life or has vigilance. They all have flying. You know exactly what it's coming to do, and it's coming to save you.
There was a point in time in which Wizards was like, we're going to print Rhea Dawnbreaker, and then we're going to print Rhea Dawnbreaker again, and then we're going to print her again, and we'll make a promo version that's all super shiny, and we're going to print her again. We're going to put an Ultimate Masters because we can, and even as it has been reprinted into the ground, it is completely unplayable and constructed, and is still worth something. Still worth 75 cents to $1 for this card that no one possibly would play unless you're collecting angels, building your angel deck, or doing something with Angel Tribal. And that is super sweet. I love angels. They're great. They're super iconic for Magic. There's a ton of them you can point to and see, like, look at this incredible piece of art. This is what Magic is capable of doing.
Yeah.
That's why
they're kind of the opposite of demons in the sense that demons can give you something really great, but there's usually a cost involved where it's like, okay, here's this thing, but you can't just have it. Angels might be expensive, but there's rarely a downside to an angel. Like if you're paying 5 for an Avacyn, there's no downside to that. If you're paying 8 or whatever for Rhea Dawnbringer, that's just all upside. Shall I? There's no weakness. You know what I mean? There's no catch there. You're getting a big body. You're getting a really cool effect. You have sort of the religious undertones that when you think of angels, you only think good things, where it's like someone's going to send me an angel. And usually when that angel comes, they have the power power to change the game. And so a lot of symbolism there, just again, a sort of iconic white card. And they find, new ways to do them by giving them different color combinations of a Boros angel. There was talk of like famously the black-green angel. And, sometimes you see like an Azorius angel or things like that.
We're still waiting for the last sister, the last Avacyn sister. It's the black-white angel.
Telling you.
Gonna be sweet. And they have, tried to make some lower mana cost angels before, but generally they're like, we're just gonna make them more expensive. They're gonna be sweet, they're gonna be cool, and they always have been, which is great. Karmic Guide being the number 1 on EDH Rek, which I thought was kind of cool as the number 1 angel, with the Avacyn Angel of Hope right behind it.
I believe it.
But that said, I'll turn the corner here to our number 1. Ruben, what's your number 1?
My number 1 has to be on brand. All right. Again, it's got to win a bunch of tournaments. It's got to be playable in a bunch of formats. It's got to be, you say that it's this deck, you know what it's doing, but also, like, I'm here to be the red mage, and you got to have goblins at number 1. Because goblins, it's Magic the Gathering, you have a goblins deck, okay? Goblins are super iconic. Now, they from Goblin Lackey to being Goblin Synergies, right? You have Legacy Goblins or old extended Goblins that are Goblin Lackey, Goblin Ringleader, Goblin War Chief. You have the Onslaught block Goblins that very nearly won that Pro Tour. You have just all of that original Goblin goodness. And then you have just goblins from throughout history. Things like Goblin Guide in burn decks being the most efficient thing that you can be doing. You have Grenzo Havoc Razor, which is one of the most popular mono-red generals. You have Vile Smasher the Fierce, which I think is one of the most popular Rakdos generals, if not the most. And then goblins that just keep making other goblins or make your goblins better, like Sharpshooter or Krenko Mob Boss or Wart or anything like that. However, the top 3 most expensive goblins are not ones that you might expect. Do you think that you could name any of the most expensive goblins in terms of dollars?
No, and I just looked at them, so I won't cheat. But like, it's just a very surprising list.
So it's Dockside Extortionist from Commander 2019.
Makes sense.
That's a $19 card.
$19 card.
Yeah, I believe it.
Goblin Wizard from the Dark.
Part of the reserve list.
Yeah. Sure. And Goblin Settler, which is an uncommon from Starter.
Yikes.
That they'll never reprint.
That they'll never reprint, because when it comes into play, you destroy target land. It's a 1/1 for 4, and it's been printed one time, and it's $45.
That $45 uncommon.
But yeah, I mean, goblins throughout history, you have all of the lords, of course. You have all of the all-star standouts, things like Kiki Jiki and Mizzix of the Ismagus, Goblin Lackey, Rabble Master and Pile Driver and Chieftain and Goblin King. Of course, you also have Goblin Recruiter, which is on the banned list and giving you some of that sort of clout as well. Chain Whirler being the card of a Pro Tour or 2. I love goblins.
Goblins are my number 4, and I mean, you just can't deny how ubiquitous they are. Legacy play, modern play. I mean, it feels like there's nothing goblins can't do, where it's like they can tutor, with things like Goblin Matron. They just are there to turn them sideways. They're not necessarily known for going big. There are certainly some exceptions, Pile Driver and Rabble Master being one of them, but typically they're known for going wide, being really, really small, having odd abilities like Goblin Welder, which sees play in a lot of the 2-card Monty or sort of Tezzeret style decks, being able to tutor for random things, winning out of nowhere with cards like Goblin Grenade, this weird sort of self-sacrificing that goblins do. But more than anything, goblins just have a great sort of sense of humor about them. Wizards has never taken them too seriously. A lot of the flavor text and a lot of the cards just aren't meant to be, they're meant to be fun. You have cards like Boom Pile. You have Goblin Cannon of like, find your cousin, put your cousin in the cannon. So, not only is it a good, dangerous strategy, but there's also a sense of fun there that really isn't there with a lot of the creature types.
And you forgot step 3, which is get another cousin.
Get another cousin, that's
which
right.
is awesome. This was my number 5. I definitely wanted it in the top 5, no matter what. Goblins are just incredible in terms of the ability for them to be very serious, very scary, or very silly and very ridiculous, almost storybook-like. Honestly, when the Dieter Lizzie stuff showed up in Urza's Saga, to now it's going to be very, gritty and, kiki-chiki's, the fire, and so on and so forth, and Vile Smasher's nuts. And the fact that Dockside Extortionist, my God, I was not expecting that card to be popping up at the top of the charts, not just of the money, but also EDH Rec, which of course those things are connected. But regardless, there's so many fun goblins, awesome, interesting. Wizards went too far in Onslaught block, but it's so difficult when they do tribal stuff. Oops, they ferried. Oops, they goblins. It's so crazy hard. I mean, even in Ixalan, right? It's vampires eventually got there after you gave them an insane planeswalker to use. Right. But goblins are sweet. I love them. It's fun. And like you said, when someone says, I'm playing a goblin deck, you know.
You know what's happening.
And I think that's great. Aaron, what's your number one?
My number one is a creature type that has managed to wiggle its way into just about every format, with the exception of Pauper. It is still a viable strategy in older formats. It makes for a great gateway deck. A lot of people talk about how Legacy and Vintage can be very expensive, but if you're looking to do anything on a budget level, this is a great way to sort of dip your toe into those expensive older formats. It has a lot of the earmarks of a successful creature type in that there's brute force, there's the ability to be offensive, there's also abilities to protect yourself and your creatures. There are disruption effects. There are ways to make mana not matter, to get discounts on these cards, to be able to tutor for them. And they're just a weird, important creature type in Magic. My number one are Eldrazi. So the Eldrazi were first introduced to us in Zendikar block as sort of being these creatures that we'd never really seen before, almost like something out of a Cthulhu mythos of lots of tentacles, very alien, but not really being evil in the sense that we think of evil. You have the big three of Ulamog, Emrakul, and Kozilek that devour, but don't really do it to be mean. It's just sort of what they're built to do. And, these sort of genderless, godlike beings that aren't even real to some extent. I remember something in the lore about them being the ones that we see are just sort of extensions of what they really are. And we just had never seen anything like this. When the big three were released, you had a 15/15, give you a free turn. Oh my God. And is still one of the main targets of any sort of show and tell cheating strategy. And have continued to be powerful even in their newer forms. And even just the littler ones like Thought Not Seer. You have Reality Smasher that can be, all of these things can be cheated into play thanks to cards like Eye of Ugin. Eldrazi Winter was a big part of the reason why Eye of Ugin got banned in Modern. Try playing that with Cloud Post and Legacy. You can have a really, really good time. And even in Vintage, being able to power these things out with Moxen and Cavern of Souls and Eldrazi Temple. You'd be surprised how many Vintage decks just cannot deal with an Eldrazi horde of here's a Reality Smasher, here's a bunch of Thorn effects, have a really good time. And so the fact that these cards have been able to remain powerful in formats where it's very hard to make a dent for tribal strategies really says something. And I don't think we've seen the last of them. We needed a break from them, but sure. I don't think we've seen the last of them.
This was my number 4. It is the iconic colorless creature type.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wait, so Fairy was your number...
I'm sorry, not my number 4. This is my number 5.
Okay.
Apologies. This is the iconic colorless creature type, even more so than Constructs at this point. You had Eldrazi Winter, which dominated a whole season, a whole Pro Tour. You have multiple types of when Eldrazi was dominant. You have the Bant Eldrazi decks. You have the colorless Eldrazi decks. You have the big three, as you mentioned, particularly Emrakul and Sneak and Show and that whole sort of deal. Then you have Commander, where Kozilek and Ulamog, and then you have Tron and Modern. It goes on and on and on and on. And not to mention the fact that the Eldrazi are still one of the biggest, baddest bads that has ever come across Magic the Gathering.
I've never been able to get over the fact that, Void Winter just can't even. And that nothing on Void Winter is even, and it's like the number of words on the card isn't even, like the mana cost and stuff. I love it. Nothing is even on that card. It's absolutely brilliant. Emrakul, because they were a slave to that number 13. They just had to have it be 13 mana, and oh my God, had to be 13 mana, and had to have that freaking mechanic essentially attacked onto it without having it attacked.
Instance, yeah.
I mean, seriously, it was completely. They just kind of lose their mind when they design Eldrazi. It's super
But
weird.
that's how it should be, though. Like, that's what
Exactly.
makes the Eldrazi so fascinating, is that you don't know what they're thinking. You don't know what they're doing. You know, when you look at a merfolk or you look at a goblin, they're wearing their heart on their sleeve. You know, there's no real subtlety there. There's no real, what you see is what you get. But with the Eldrazi, you don't even know what you're seeing, number one. And number two, these plans, like when Shadows over Innistrad was going on, I used to love going to Reddit and seeing like the theories of like, what did Emrakul mean when she was in that weird mind game with Jace? You know, all of the ways that people were theorizing, like, oh, well, Ulamog, like, prepares the way, and then Kozilek, like, you know, filters the material, and then, like, that was fascinating. And that's a level of, that's a deep dive that you don't see with these other tribes. There's no conspiracy theories about what the allies are up to, or what the fairies are up to. No, you can only do that with the Eldrazi, and that's incredible.
Fair enough. All right. So for my number one here, which I believe is Ruben's number 9 via the process of elimination.
It is
my number one because it's one of the creatures that, or they're one of the creature types that I feel is brought up when you talk about Magic. Now, they talk about angels, but they'll also talk about this creature type almost immediately. One of the first cards I ever saw was of this type of creature type. One of the first cards that ever got like super, you know, people were super excited. They were trading this for Black Lotuses or whatever. You would only hear about them doing that and freaking out over cards like Shivan Dragon, because dragons are my number one creature type, my number one tribe, because, you know, dragons being the large red creature, you have the small red creature as your number one. Essentially is my large red creature. But there are other colors that have dragons. Kakusho, the Evening Star, is ranked higher than any red dragon.
Skittles
And
Skitterix.
yeah, and still Hellkite is the number one ranked EDH dragon, which I thought was kind of interesting, but makes sense. It's colorless and fits into any deck.
Exactly.
And it's very good. They've also printed it 1 million times, which is good. So it's not infinite dollars. But, you know, there's cards like Skitterix that they've only printed once, and it's like almost $30 now, because it's kind of hard to print Infect cards again, let me tell you. Or even Karthus, Tyrant of Jund, being $22. That's kind of nuts. And recently it was Corvold, Fey Cursed King.
So good.
Which is so good. Let's just go ahead and run this one so you can have an example. What's a dragon? Corvold, Fey Cursed King, is a green, red, a black, and 2 generic mana for a 4/4 mythic legendary dragon noble that has flying, and whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, sacrifice another permanent. Whenever you sacrifice a permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on Corvold and draw a card. This was in the Throne of Eldraine Brawl decks. They're very hard to get. It's like a $20 card right now, which is ridiculous. And when you play this card, you'll understand why it's sweet, why it's good, and even cards like just recently Nicol Bolas the Ravager to show you like there are awesome dragons. Dragons are great. They made a whole set named after dragons. Dragons of Tarkir, which was sweet. So like dragons are everywhere. Dragons are magic, and dragons are one of the things that I will immediately take to any muggle. You know, it's like what's a magic? Like, look at all these awesome dragons. They're cool. Let's start there.
This was my number 9. Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
we discussed the nostalgia behind certain creature types. You know, the way that zombies, you know, are like sort of mirror images of us, and sort of the duality there of seeing humanity kind of turn against itself and what that would look like. Angels and sort of the religious undertones of the, you know, this thing is going to be so game changing that it's going to save me and it's going to turn things around, you know, and dragons just have this air of like awe and majesty about them, where it's like they're just always these beautiful, devastating creatures, you know, that have the ability to be really destructive, but that isn't always the case. And so, you know, dragons are something that even if you don't play Magic, like you said, you can grok what a dragon is. You know, there are people that watch Game of Thrones that would never be caught dead around a D&D table or at a Magic event, but they know what a dragon is, and if they see a dragon, that is something they can bond with you over. And you know, that is something that ultimately we all play Magic for, is that ability to connect to something, and dragons make a really great icebreaker in that regard.
I do think dragons are far and away the most iconic Magic the Gathering creature type. But they've only been tribal a couple of times. Esper dragons being a notable example. Also Gruul dragons, that was the version that I played a lot of. As well as Rakdos, Kolagon the Storm's Fury dragons was a ton of fun. Thunderbreak Regent being one of my favorite cards of all time. They don't work well together a lot, and that is by design. But when they do, they can be terrifying. But yeah, certainly when you say Magic the Gathering, when you say the fantasy genre, when you talk about any type of creature that is beyond ourselves, dragons are at the top of the list.
Yeah, when Wizards wants to rely on, like, here's an awesome cycle to, like, show off kind of thing, Cycle of Dragons is never a bad choice. That said, that does it for our top 10 tribes. Goodness gracious, you will see them on your screen right now for your review. Take a look at my list, Aaron's list, Ruben's top 10. And we want to hear from you about what card we did not, or I'm sorry, what tribe we did not talk about. And we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you.
Going to move here to our final slide. All right, I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, my co-host, Aaron Campbell and Ruben Bressler, you guys for watching or listening, and hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv at Magic Mikes, on Twitter at Magic Mikes Cast, our Magic Mikes subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Talk to us privately at MagicMikesPodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at MagicMikesPodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes and Spotify. Or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.